Welcome, friends, to another special segment, and team focuses on the war.
Roger,
and as has been observed by some people, that
Roger.
right from
Okay.
It's the sound is
Maybe
Roger, your sound, I think it's a network issue. So just switch off your camera and only speak. Just switch off your camera.
the network issue.
Yes.
okay. We all know you look handsome, so it's okay now.
Okay.
I think if most of us switch off our videos, it will help.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Friends, welcome to this special webinar. And our focus today is on the theme of the wall. And there are different kinds of walls, right from US-Mexico border to Israel's apartheid wall. There are several walls across the world, walls that are ripping people's lives and lands, separating families, and intensifying state violence, surveillance, repression, and exploitation. These walls are tangible monuments of militarism and domination, unilaterally defining and fortifying borders and state control. It is in this context that our focus is very specially on the wall that the Palestinians are engaged with, and the Stop the Wall movement that is a grassroots movement of the people. And it is in this context that we will be looking at this physical wall of apartheid, of colonization, of militarization, and all the evils associated with it. But at the same time, we look at other walls which may not be physical, but they are walls. Walls that you find in Sri Lanka. You have the group, the majority Sinhalese group, which could be termed as being largely Buddhist, and the minority Tamil group, which could be termed as largely Hindu, but it's largely the Sinhalese Tamil conflict, and there's a wall there. And right here in India, where we are, we have another big wall, a wall that has come down the centuries, the wall of caste. And therefore, it is in this context that we have gathered here to be partners in the Stop the Wall, Break the Wall movement. And IPSN, most of you are aware of it. IPSN is the Indo Palestine Solidarity Network, which is a growing network of like-minded people drawn from all parts of the country, committed to justice and freedom for Palestine. We also have with us our friends from Sri Lanka, and they are also concerned with partnership and solidarity. And I will request Aruna Shanta Nonis to say a few words about their movement or campaign.
Good evening, I think good afternoon and good morning to friends. We are very glad to join with the groups in India, especially this Indo Palestine Solidarity Network. Our group is a collective of civil society organizations. Actually, we formed it very recently with this COVID-19 to respond to the COVID-19 situation, but we found that it's very important for us to respond to the other issues of the country. You know, we are in a very turmoil situation right now with this new regime and also with the COVID. So we are together, but we cannot forget what is going on around the world, and we have to extend our hands to any struggle of our people, because we always with the side of oppressed. So therefore, our solidarity with Palestinian, and there are so many organizations in Sri Lanka, Palestinian Solidarity Organization. There are a number of journalists today. Some of our friends will talk also, and also Christian organization, Buddhist organization, which work together for the struggle of Palestinian. So this wall matter came during this period because it is these are the days that we commemorate um, the International Day Against Separated Wall. So when Ranjan came out with the suggestion, why don't we go for a joint program? So we were willingly, our group was so happy to come and work together for this international collaboration and international solidarity. So now it is time. I don't want to explain, Roger explain everything very clearly, the history and all these things. So on behalf of the Sri Lankan Civil Society Collective for the Better World, so I thank for this opportunity, and also I welcome all of you for this webinar, and we are looking forward to hear from our friends in Palestine as well as from India, and also listen to our colleague from Sri Lanka, from Jaffna Sudarshan. And thank you very much, everybody, for joining this program. Let's go ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aruna. And I will now request Ranjan to introduce our speakers to us. And as our speakers come in, and if you have any comments or questions, please remember to write them in the chat box. So over to you, Ranjan.
Thanks, Roger. We have speakers, but we have somebody who is very special in our audience, who I managed to invite only earlier today. That is Rifat Kassis. Rifat, please raise your hand so everybody knows who you are. Yeah, that's Rifat Kassis. He is the general coordinator of the Global Kairos for Justice. He is the father figure of Kairos Palestine in many ways. A good friend, I don't know how it appears on your screen, but there is a Michelle Nisser, who is also a very special person. These are the two pillars of what became Kairos today. So if we are here today, it's because these two people put together this massive global movement that we have today. So we are really honored to have both of them with us. I hope I have embarrassed you enough. Okay. And then when we started planning this program, I often ask Rifat to give me names, and Rifat gave me a name, and I said, look, I don't mind somebody who's not known, but who knows the subject very well. And I don't mind a younger person. And if it gives us gender balance, woman, that's even better. And that's how we have Manal Square, right? She's there. I think everybody knows who you are, but you may raise your hand just so that we are all sure that it's you who we are talking about. She is from the West Bank town of Salfi, and even as a young person has been part of the struggles carried out by the Popular Struggle Coordination Committee. And as a student in the UK, she was an activist there too, calling on her university to divest funds from companies in Israel. She's currently a member of the Secretariat of the Palestine Youth Forum and engaged in research on the walls in the Arab world. I could say a lot more about her, but I'm sure that the 30 minutes that she's got in which she speaks, we will get to know the kind of person who we've had. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation, and also for the enthusiasm with which you have supported us as we have gone forward. I hope you'll enjoy being with us. And then we have, in my screen, is just next to her, Bandhu Manchala. It says, Bandhu, raise your hands. Everybody knows you by now. Bandhu is an old friend, me, a famous theologian. That's how I can think of him, and a social thinker. And I only know that when he worked in the World Council of Churches, I went to him every time we did anything to do with theology to get his advice. And whether busy or not busy, he gave us his time. He is really very much the brain behind what happened in the justice tourism movement when he wrote important and made important presentations on justice tourism and pilgrimages for transformation as he helped us to formulate that. There's so much more I can say about it, except to say that he's an intellectual, a writer, a theologian, and so many other things. Yeah. And he currently works in the US with the global ministries of the United Church of Christ. Then there is a friend who I came to know not too long back, but Jude Sudarshan. It says Mahendran there, I'm not sure, but I know him as Jude Sudarshan. I also met him when I was in Sri Lanka. Jude, just raise your hand so that everybody knows it's you. Okay. And Jude is a Christian priest from Jaffna. And but he's not just a parish priest. He's an educationalist. He was formerly full-time into human rights work. And right now he sees himself as a person who's working on reconciliation and ecumenism. And he has extensive work with displaced people in Sri Lanka in the north of the country. So these are then there is Lakshman Gunasekara, who is a journalist. I would like to introduce Lakshman separately at the end of the meeting, because Lakshman's role is really not the usual kind of vote of thanks, but the kind of message. He will give us our parting message. You know, this is what you do. Yes, Lakshman, you wanted to say, you put your hand up. Okay, so I will introduce Lakshman separately, and that would be my privilege. Yeah, so we will, back to you, Roger.
Thank you, Ranjan, for introducing all our speakers for this evening. And we will go on to the main focus, the wall. We shall call upon Manal to make a presentation. And friends, remember, any questions in the chat box, please.
Okay. There is a movie that Manal is going to first play, so we will.
Can I start?
No, I'll just air the movie, and then we will then you can after the clip. Manal, you are free to start.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for organizing this great event, and thank you for the great introduction about me, Ranjan. I think that the video that has been just displayed tells you an introduction, an overall introduction about what the wall is about and why the wall, I mean the apartheid wall, has been built in the West Bank. But for me, I would like to start talking about the apartheid wall by defining what the wall is. For me, I define the wall as an advanced step of Israel's settler colonial project to tighten the control over us in Palestine, specifically in the West Bank, through the Bantustanization of the West Bank. And before that step, I mean, before the construction of the wall, there was attempts, successful attempts actually, to ghettoize Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip in the 1990s. So walling off Palestinians or certain areas of Palestine started long before the construction of the wall. The wall, as you know, what Israel, I mean, has started the construction of the wall in June 2002. And before that, Israel, I mean, a few months before that, Israel started preparing or paving the way for the construction of the apartheid wall in a military operation known as the Defensive Shield. The Defensive Shield is considered to be one of the largest military invasions of the West Bank, started on March 2002, where Israel, I mean, the Israeli military destroyed the infrastructure in Palestinian towns and cities, intensified violence violent practice against Palestinians, were held preparing for the construction of the wall. As you've seen in that short video, evidently, the wall is meant to grab more land of Palestine, and as I said, to control our life and our future, our present, of course, and our future even more. And this is why the wall map is based on the Oslo Agreement map. The Oslo Agreement is the funny peace agreement that was signed between Israel and the Palestine Liberation Organization in 1993, which turned out to be only a hoax for Israel to confiscate more Palestinian land. And according to that peace agreement, the West Bank has been divided into 3 different areas. The first area is known as Area A, which includes major Palestinian cities, and it constitutes about 17.5% of the West Bank area, and Area A is under full Palestinian control. Area B includes green areas and some Palestinian towns, and it is under under mixed Israeli and Palestinian control. And the area constitutes about 21.5, I think, % of the West Bank, and the remaining area, which is the most fertile lands of the West Bank and other Palestinian communities and villages, is known as Area C, constituting 62% of the West Bank. And that area is under full Israeli control. And the wall is built in a way to annex all of Area C, including the illegal settlements that are usually built in Area C. So this is why the path of the wall runs not along the green line or the 1967 borders, but it runs inside. It goes inside the West Bank to isolate Palestinian villages and towns, and to annex illegal settlements, confiscating with that or grabbing more Palestinian land. And this is why the wall de facto annexes 46% of the West Bank, and it just creates or makes the West Bank like a collection of Bantustans that are completely isolated from each other. Especially talking about this, I would like just to mention a bit about the structure of the wall. The wall is more than 770 kilometers long, and it is 8 meters high. The physical form of the wall, the wall takes more than one physical form. Part of the wall, some areas in the West Bank are surrounded by concrete wall, while like Bethlehem, certain parts of Bethlehem, Qalqilia and Jerusalem districts. Other areas in the West Bank are surrounded by electric fences that have trenches, have surveillance cameras. They also have trace path footprints, like in the Bethlehem in particular is surrounded by both electric fences and concrete walls. And like the different, although the wall takes different physical forms, but the purpose or the objectives that are being realized are the same, and the effect on Palestinians is the same. And like the wall, as I said earlier, the way it is built like this and the structure of it has successfully created ghettos, Palestinian ghettos, or Bantustan. I'm talking here about 5 ghettos in like the West Bank turned into five separated ghettos due to the wall. The first ghetto is the northern ghetto, which has been completed during the first phase of the wall, where the northern Palestinian towns and cities are being completely isolated from the rest of the West Bank areas through the wall. In the northern ghetto, also 13 Palestinian villages have been isolated, and now they are behind the wall. They are in the western part of the wall, annexed and surrounded, of course, by settlements. And there are 50 Palestinian villages to the eastern part of the wall. They are outside the wall, and people, Palestinians who have lands in the western part of the wall, they cannot access these lands. So this means that Palestinians are totally divided or separated from their land to the west of the wall, or the western side of the apartheid wall. And the second ghetto is the central one. And in the central ghetto, the wall successfully isolated or annexed the major Israeli illegal settlement blocks, where also some Palestinian villages are inside the settlement blocks, isolated from the rest of the Palestinian towns. When the wall is totally complete, other Palestinian villages in the central ghetto, they will be surrounded by the wall from 4 sides, and they will be connected to the rest of the West Bank by tunnels. The third ghetto that was divided or created due to the wall is Jerusalem. 181 kilometers of the wall surrounds Jerusalem, separating the people, Palestinians in Jerusalem, from the rest of the West Bank. Actually, the wall encircles Jerusalem, and the ring of settlements surrounding it. And due to this, 25 Palestinian villages have been separated from Jerusalem and completely isolated. And these 25 villages outside Jerusalem, I mean, these villages that used to be part of the Jerusalem district, they will be also divided into 5 distinct ghettos in the future, as the Israeli occupation authorities plan. And due to the wall, Jerusalem, the Palestinians, I mean, in Jerusalem district, they lost 90% of the whole land of the Jerusalem district. The fourth ghetto created by the wall is the southern one, and specifically Bethlehem and Hebron. The Bethlehem only, I mean, the people of Bethlehem, due to the wall, they use about 13% of their land, and the rest of the Bethlehem area's land are confiscated by the wall. And in Hebron, large swaths of lands have been confiscated when the wall was constructed in the area where people lost like large swaths of cattle rearing areas, which is considered to be a big loss for the people of Hebron, given the fact that it is a main source of income for them in Hebron. The other ghetto is the Jordan Valley. The Jordan Valley, since the beginning of the first Intifada, there was 66 military checkpoints in the Jordan Valley, making it difficult for Palestinians from other areas in the West Bank to access the Jordan Valley. And the apartheid practices of Israel make the Jordan Valley isolated from the rest of the West Bank, although it is not directly isolated by the wall, but the wall isolates other areas and Palestinians in other places from easily accessing the Jordan Valley. The last ghetto, which is surrounded by a wall that we forget, is Gaza, the Gaza Strip. The Gaza Strip isolation, as I mentioned early on, started in the 1990s. And the wall surrounding the Gaza Strip is 55 kilometers. And that is through this wall and the military checkpoints Israel imposes on the strip, it has been tightening its inhuman siege of the strip since over 13 years. And the wall that is built around the Gaza Strip has harmed Palestinian farmers a lot because there is a buffer zone of 300 to 600 meters where Palestinians lost 25% of their agricultural land, making a lot of farmers in the strip lose their main source of income and become unemployed. So it's clear that how the wall ghettoize and isolate Palestine or the West Bank and the Gaza Strip into different areas that are completely disconnected. And this is why the looming de jure annexation plan of the West Bank is mainly based on the wall map, because the wall perfectly helps Israel to, as I said, to annex more land and to make Palestine or the West Bank just a group of Bantustans that are usually developed. I would like to share my screen with you and show you, sorry, just a second. Yeah, and can you see the what I'm sharing with you? Yes, sorry. Can you see the map? Yeah, great. So yeah, this is the annexation, Israel's annexation map. I mean, Israel plans to de jure annex the West Bank, and this plan is endorsed by Trump's U.S. Which is now the previous administration, U.S. administration, through the so-called deal of the century. As you can see, this map shows the areas to be annexed to Israel. According to this map, as I said, which is based on the wall map, these areas that I'm pointing to here, areas like these, and these areas too, I mean the ones in white, they will be annexed, I mean de jure annexed, and this means that 75 Palestinian communities with a population of 118,000 Palestinians will be also annexed, but they are not going to be given Israeli citizenship. They will be given, they will be given an unrecognized status, and the future of the 75 Palestinian villages and communities in these areas are ambiguous, because they at the end, Israel will be ethnically cleanse them from their lands to make room for more illegal settlers to settle on Palestinians' lands. And as the map shows, there also will be in the areas to be de jure annexed, we Palestinians are going to lose 50,000 hectares of agricultural lands. In the annexed areas, and 85% of animal husbandry is located in the areas to be de jure annexed, which has like a catastrophic effect on our economy, on our already bad economy, due to the construction of the wall and the long-standing occupation of Palestine. And the road system that connects Palestinian towns and cities will be replaced with an alternative one, a more complicated system that would take, let's say, longer time to reach areas that take now like shorter period of time in order to access them. And I would also like to show you how Israel tries to realize more objectives of its Zionist settler colonial project through this map. Israel claims that in its annexation plan, they are going to give Palestinians compensation areas, and the compensation areas that Israel is talking about are to the north of the West Bank, as you can see here. And these areas, they are called the Triangle. The people living in these areas are now they are Israeli citizens. I mean, they are part of the 20% Palestinian population of Israel. So they hold Israeli citizenship. They will become part of the West Bank if this map is to be implemented. And in this way, by the way, this area is very overcrowded, and this is why Israel want to make it as part of the compensation areas, because in this way, Israel gets rid of the Palestinians living in Israel and constituting a minority that's being discriminated against in Israel right now. And this is part of an old Israeli plan to reduce the number of Palestinians who hold Israeli citizenship in Israel. The other compensation area is to the south, particularly a big portion of the Naqab is going to be part of the compensation area. And this part is not, cannot be exploited for agriculture. It's not a fertile area. And that's a problem because the fertile areas will become part of Israel, while the other areas will just be part of Palestine if they really want to compensate us as they claim. The last thing, but not least, is how the Gaza Strip is treated according to this plan. As you see, this is the Gaza Strip, and Israel claims that it's gonna contribute to the development of the Gaza Strip, as the name of the peace plan suggests, the peace to prosperity plan. It's just a prosperity of Israel's apartheid system and economy. Because as you see, the Gaza Strip, they claim that it will be developed through being given another portion of the Naqab desert. And and this is for them a way to solve the what is called the Gaza problem, the problem created by the Israelis. The problem created by Israeli apartheid through the long-standing siege of the Gaza Strip. I would like to also share with you some of the impacts of the apartheid wall. I mean, long-term impacts on us in Palestine. It is not just about the Bantustanization or the political achievements. I mean, the political achievements that Israel long for through the wall, but there are also other consequences. I mean, devastating consequences on the Palestinian economy, because, as I said earlier, the wall annexed the most fertile areas in the West Bank, and that means that Palestinian farmers can no longer, or they can hardly access their agricultural land, making us depend more on the Israeli economy, or make Palestinians cheap wage laborers in Israeli corporations, because when they lose their lands, their main source of income, they tend to try to find alternatives to survive. And the wall has also, let's say, worsened the water crisis created by Israel since the occupation of the West Bank in 1967, because one of the first steps taken by Israel when it occupied the West Bank was to take over the major water resources in the West Bank, and they started selling off our water to us with high prices, and the de jure annexation plan and the wall, they've just, as I said, worsened the water crisis, because 60% of the water resources are in the areas to be de jure annexed, which are already de facto annexed. And in the northern ghetto of the West Bank, I mean, to the north of the West Bank, the Israeli occupation authorities confiscated tons of water wells and underground water wells when they start the construction of the wall, and this has destroyed 70,000 dunams of agricultural land, which is a catastrophe for Palestinian farmers. And in the areas where they have been annexed by the wall, Palestinians cannot access their lands to cultivate them, or to harvest their olive trees every year, which is considered also an economic loss. The last thing that I would like to highlight regarding the impact of the wall on us is that the apartheid wall threatens our natural heritage. I'm talking about here about the how the wall divides forests from each other, like because 39 kilometers of forested areas are located behind the wall, and we cannot access these areas, and like species like animals cannot travel in between these areas because the wall is considered a barrier for them. And this threatens the extinction of certain species and the extinctions of these species, and the fact that we cannot access these areas for conservation and to take care of these areas is something that we consider an attack on our natural heritage. And the most obvious example is Rihan forest, and that forest is to the north of the West Bank. That forest has been annexed due to the wall. It is part of the UNESCO's tentative natural heritage areas, and it is rich with biodiversity, but unfortunately the animal species in that area are now being threatened due to the wall. I have more to say, so I don't know, shall I stop or talk more about not the wall, but about the resistance to the wall, or is it something that you would like me to share with you later on? What do you think?
I don't know. Roger, are you there? Okay. Manal, can I suggest that, if you look at the chat box, so many questions you have already raised in the minds of people. So I think it would be good for us to move on and then come back to the questions, because then you might be able to also deal with it in a different way based on where we are coming from. Okay, is that all right? Is that all right with you?
Yeah. So you suggest I continue speaking?
Yeah, I'm saying stop now, move on to other two speakers, and then there are a lot of questions that I think that are there. And meanwhile, you can also have a look at some of the questions in the chat box, and those are the ones that are drawing our attention with the limited time. Yes.
Yeah.
I think
that's okay.
Our chair. I'll just take the the freedom of taking his place, and the idea when we planned this, we said that as we said at the very beginning, there are as Roger remarked at the very beginning, walls that are visible and that are constructed, that are in concrete and cement and stone, and then there are walls that are invisible. And so now let's get a response from a person who addresses the issues of invisible walls, the Dalits in India. But I think Bandhu will also respond to what you have said and then draw his parallels from the Dalit question.
Thank you. Good evening to all of you. Thank you, Manal, for that very vivid description of the situation and what the walls have done and continue to do to the people in Palestine. And my solidarity with you all in this struggle. And I also want to say thank you very much to IPSN for inviting me, and Ranjan for that very generous words with lots of superlatives, which I don't believe that I deserve all of that. But it is also a joy to see so many of my friends like Michelle, Rifat, Nora, Muriel, and Aruna Gnanadasan, and these have all been friends that I have friends and partners in the struggle for a long time. And I do this, I make this response with a sense of deep gratitude and also as an expression of my solidarity. I first visited Palestine in 2005 when the walls were being built, and I came back a completely changed person. And again, I went in 2017 and I saw the contrast, not so much, as everybody would see, the affluence and impoverishment, but what really struck me was the arrogance of power and the extent of dehumanization that it causes not only to those who have been deprived and disprivileged and disempowered, but also the dehumanization that the aggressors have continue to go through. So this is the point that became very clear to me. So the point is that the walls, besides what they do to the disempowered and the impoverished, also reveal something about the extent of dehumanization that the aggressors go through. Now, I have been asked to talk about the walls of the Dalit life world, but I would like to focus more on the caste walls, the walls of caste system in India, not so much the Dalits, but Dalits is a very important starting point for my presentation. Now, walls perhaps is not the right image to describe India's caste system. It is often illustrated through the image of a multi-storied building without a staircase, or a pyramidal structure, or without or a house or a structure without an ascending stairway, or not linear walls but ghettos, circular walls. That is how there are many images to describe caste system. So be that as it may, whether it is walls, structures, or any image that you want to use, but the caste system and what it does continues to be strong, unshaken, and weathered many assaults for over 2 millennia. These are not visible walls, but they are present and powerful every day. Now, there are three distinct characters about the caste. One is that, the caste walls, if I use the word expression, image of walls to talk about caste system, these are porous walls, porous for exploitation, for labor, for cheap labor, and for sex, right? And these are also ghettos of greed, because to hold the unjust gain within the borders of their control. That is what caste does. And at the same time, these are also walls, that hold power and privilege of a community within these ghettos and keep them in a constant negative emotions of greed, domination, envy, hatred, and disempowerment. This is how caste operates between and among communities. And that is where, caste becomes an extremely difficult thing to break, because it's not just the rest against one community, but it is all to do with, the ghettos. How do we break the walls among the people of the Indian society? But I want to talk about the new walls today that have come up, walls that actually reinforce the existing walls that the Indian people go through. One is the walls, the policies. When I talk about the invisible walls, it's not just the cultural walls of caste system, but also the policies that actually sort of reinforce, strengthen the ghettoization of people. Recently, we have heard about the new national education policy and the privatization, the labor policies, the new agricultural policies. These are policies that further strengthen and actually erect much stronger walls for people to stay in these ghettos of one side, ghettos of impoverishment, and the other side, ghettos of greed. Number two, the other one is the laws, the new laws that are being enacted. The laws that restrict human rights, laws against people's expression of resistance and dissent, and the freedom of expression and religion, and the possibility for development and emancipation. There are a number of laws that are being sort of introduced in order to keep people where they are, and virtually diminish all possibilities for people for any kind of a mobility horizontally or vertically in any sense. And the third kind of such force that I see today in Indian society is the culture. There's a glorification of oppressive cultural stereotypes and myths to reinforce certain things. Some of these caste structures, caste relationships, such as the honor killings, lynching, restricting interfaith marriages, and also unleashing terror on religious minorities and restricting people the freedom to convert to other religions. So this is, again, another factor that we need to take into account when we talk about the reinforcement of caste in the Indian society. And the fourth and the last one is the destructive, demonic role of religion. Religions, instead of creating a world community, in Indian, we have this beautiful expression of Vasudhaiva Kutumbikam. The whole world is God's family. Instead of that, what the religions are doing today, the right-wing religions and the religious fundamentalism is doing today, is to build walls of hatred, walls of division, discord, fear, suspicion, and power and domination. And, all that are against the basic basic beliefs of what people believe in God and people believe in religion. So religion, instead of being a source of life, a source of unity, a source of togetherness, has become a source of evil and death. And I think that is the same situation we're in Palestine. And in many other parts of the world, the white evangelicalism, Zionism, radical Islam, and Hindutva in my country, India, and in many other places. And we are going to hear from Jude as well about the Sinhala Buddhist combination. So this is a situation that we have faced in such a situation. But let me end this with a positive note. One is that, all that, not all, everything is about, not everything is negative and depressing. There are many small, spontaneous, grassroots demonstrations of people in many parts of the world to make a difference. And I think the spirit of resistance, this rise of resistance, or somebody said, there's a contagion of resistance amidst the present pandemic of COVID. There's a contagion of resistance against abuse of power, against repressive politics, against authoritarian regimes and ideologies. So I think that is probably the only hope for us. The struggle continues even as these walls continue. The only way that the walls have crumbled in history and will crumble is through people's clamor for justice, freedom, and solidarity. And I think this solidarity in hope and resistance is the only thing that would make a difference in today's world. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Roger?
No.
Let's see, Roger.
No, you just continue.
Okay. Roger, I think Roger just came back and no, he's there. Yes, Roger.
So thank you, Dina Bandhu. We move on to Jude.
Shall I? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the presentation from Manal expressing their plight in Palestine due to the war. But however, I give a congratulative note first. There is a big success from your advocacy from Palestine and the Friends of Palestine that bringing the name Apartheid Wall, because the Israeli name was fence, fence for security, fence for defense. But bringing a new name, alternate name, that Apartheid Wall is a big success. And this name is now getting familiar by the international community, not only the international community, but also the international ICJ, International Court of Justice, also explained that it is wrong. The wall is wrong. So it's an interesting thing that it's a success. It's a big success to change, counter the narrative of the occupier. In the past, the walls and fences were used to defense. People fortified to defend their territorial sovereignty and protected themselves from outside attack. Still, occupying states claim that their walls are just fence to defend themselves from terrorist intrusion. Zeal of Gaza Strip always comes in my mind when I think of our fate during the wartime in Sri Lanka from the north. We were totally cut off from the rest of the country. Such my own experience tells me again and again that using the word fence for security is an abuse of word in the context of apartheid wall. So therefore, I congratulate you all bringing up this word to make people to understand what is the impact and effects of this separation wall, apartheid wall. Actually, apartheid wall produced humanitarian crisis for its residents. It's a blockade. It's a seizure. Walls separate us from others. Walls are monuments of expulsion, exclusion, oppression, discrimination, and exploitation. A section of people sometimes profit from walls. They may be private military or security companies in US context. This creates new income generating opportunities to some people. We had these experiences during our wartime. People help others for human trafficking, and so they get money out of all these things. Occupying powers erect walls. They do not respect the fundamental right of the occupied population. Walls are used for colonization. Wall itself is a human right violation, I would say. Walls create suffering to the occupied people. So walls for security reasons or political reasons? That's a big question in my context too. Who interpret what? Wall is a collective punishment by the colonizers, I would say. There are many walls which separates us. Some are physical, but most of them are metaphorical or invisible walls. The physical wall solution is practiced by many countries, but the Israeli occupation theory and this practice is practiced everywhere in the country. It has become a model in all over the countries wherever occupation is going on. However, the invisible walls are also equally dangerous and affecting people's life severely. Therefore, I would say that whatever does estrangement and alienation and othering are apartheid walls. So walls in my country, my context is there are high security zones. According to the just war theory, the war has not been ended yet. The war came to end, the active armed conflict came to end in 2009. The Tamil Liberation Tigers were defeated. The military took over in charge everywhere, all over the island. But however, I would say the war has not come to end. Even after 11 years of the end of war, the high security zones are still maintained. Barbed wire fence can be seen in the north and eastern provinces of Sri Lanka, where Tamils live majoritarily. They are called for, they call these are for the protection of the garrisons or the brigade headquarters, but they have taken the livelihood of the residents. They have lost their houses. They have lost their traditional livelihoods. They have lost their traditional lifestyles, and they are uprooted from their own places. The places went into the land grab are the fertile land, and as you said, and the resourceful land for the people. Farmers are still struggling to get access to their land due to the high security zones. Further, fishermen are allowed to fish in the sea, but the seashore is not allowed to get back to. So that's another complicated issue, that how these walls are maintained physically. And in the Eastern Province, the native or aborigines from Eastern Province, they lost the access into their jungles, which give them their livelihood. They are uprooted from their own places. So therefore, the residents, the people lost their residence, livelihood, their own life, their own identity. They are totally uprooted. When a community is uprooted from their land, they are no more, I would say. So such walls alienate people from their traditional places, traditional livelihood practices. It's a total alienation. Sometimes it becomes a self-alienation that questions my own identity when I am totally uprooted from my own land. Land grab takes different shapes now after the end of war. Mao Zedong says that war is a politics with bloodshed, but politics is a war without bloodshed. How this war is still being carried out without bloodshed. After the end of war, the problems of war were not stopped. It has come with new shape. Under the rule of law, the government apparatus continuing such agenda with legal manner. The Forest Preservation Department, Archaeological Department, Tourism and Geological Mineral Resources, so-called departments, they come and they have become the instruments of taking land from the people. They claim the land legally, which expels the local farmers from their land. Archaeological departments, they have removed people from their traditional worshipping places, etc. Many important places have been taken legally by these departments, which are working as apparatus of the state and following implementing its dogma of occupation. Recently, I heard an American native scholar who spoke how the rule of law, the idea of rule of law, is used as a tool of genocide in their context. As you said, that's how the rules are very divisive, exploiting, and sometimes they are used for the total genocide or cultural genocide of the people. Religion also plays a vital role in this expansion project of the major ethnic community, government, state, all over this island. The establishment of Buddhist temples in the northern east places where there are mostly Hindus and minority Christians and Muslims live. There are few Buddhists too, but in new places, wherever a military camp is there was a small Buddha first comes, then he starts growing. So the establishments of Buddhist temples, erecting Lord Buddha statues have become another tool of claiming the land as and the heritage from other minorities. When the Buddha statue is erected at one place, it is used as a landmark of occupation and colonization. This statement was said by Mr. Rahub Hakim. He is a Muslim member of parliament in Sri Lanka. So state is the decision maker. The apparatus of the state are just implementing the state dogma. There is no independence, autonomous apparatus sections working under government. They all carry out the government dogma. So during the war was carried out by the armed forces, but now we are living in a so-called peace situation, but now it is from people. And there are many other issues, as Manal said, that there is no political willingness to settle the ethnic issue. The past painful crimes are not investigated and justice not served yet. People still look for their disappeared persons, that they would come. More than 2 years, people demonstrate, hunger, sit in protest on streets in rotation, but it is not heard by anybody. and the diaspora, the refugees. I think Palestinians and Sri Lankan Tamils, they have a common, this refugee problem everywhere. There are many refugees all over this world, and without proper papers, without proper identity, without a proper political identity, they cannot live as normal civilians in their country. So this exile, is that going to be a permanent thing? That's a big question yet. And we are all in the geopolitical web. We cannot settle this issue. That is another big issue outside of us is also there. So how can we turn down this injustice, alienation, the division to justice, reconciliation, and unity? I think we need all. We need all the friends, regardless of ethnic identity or religious identity. This is the time for the call for solidarity. What we are trying to do is to look at what has happened in both instances and draw the lines of solidarity, of human rights struggles, of both the people's right to live with dignity. Human rights-based language offers a unique streamlining bridge to all of us. I think we should not work on our own ethnic identities, whatever our ethnic markers, we should not work on that. I think we should use the human right-based language. That is the only one connecting thing to all the occupied or all the people, those who can voice for others. The call for solidarity is a call for inter and intra solidarity of occupied people too. Because this is a common struggle and fight for the right to dignity and self-determination. Why I say inter and intra is, I think Palestinians and we as Sri Lankan Tamils also struggle because of the internal divisions within our own communities. We forget our solidarity is important to win over our greater vision. We do not need to advocate only with the people who share our own identities, but this should be supported by everyone, even the people from my other ethnic communities, because these struggles are human rights struggles. We should work on getting the support of others, the so-called others, on the platform of human rights struggle, on the name of humanity. I think all ethnic and religious communities should show their solidarity to these people. And what I say that intra issues must be taken care of is the new phenomena within the Tamil, Sri Lankan Tamil community is very divisive within it. The modern means of political mobilization of victims have taken new exclusive ways, not inclusive, exclusive ways. But the Tamil nationalism is now using religion. It's a new phenomena. The Tamil nationalism is getting, a secular Tamil nationalism is getting a shape of Hindu Tamil nationalism now. So I do not know whether this is based on religious text or modern means of political mobilization or some other external factors working within the community to divide the community, to water down its passion. Various and conflicting interpretations of nation and region has been emerged within our own community. Now people start to talk about the caste issues, as our friends from India, Dr. Bandhu talked. And the women's issues, how the Tamil community didn't look at these issues within it. So the self-criticism, when the self-criticism comes up, the Tamil nationalists think it is an anti-Tamil nationalist propaganda. We should not talk about this. So we don't know how to accommodate the self-criticisms within the community, within the struggling community. I think we have to look into those things. How can we bring a solidarity, intra-solidarity among us first, and also then approaching the other people to voice for us on the floor of human rights struggle. And that is, I think that's the real solidarity to work on this. So what can give us real hope? New vision, new possibilities. As people affected by these walls and as movements that pose justice, freedom, equality, as our tools to resolve the problem of this planet, the occupation everywhere. We join in solidarity to the call of the 9th of November. apartheid walls, against apartheid walls, as a global day of action, not only just talking, and we will try to do something. Thank you for organizing this Zoom meeting in order to bring us all together and share our own feelings and understand how the pain is not just unique to us, but it is a common in all occupying places. We will start thinking how we can work together and move from this point. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Go ahead, if you're here.
Ranjan, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Friends, we are grateful to all our speakers for having given different insights into the wall. We had Manal actually wanting to say something about the resistance to the wall among the Palestinians. Manal, would you like to highlight it in the context of all that you've heard?
Yeah, sure. What I wanted to share with you mainly about resistance is to emphasize more joint resistance or joint struggle against different forms of walls, because from the responses of Pandu and Judy, they emphasized in their responses that that we are either we are suffering from either visible or invisible walls. We are both being systematically constructed as the inferior others, who should be oppressed, who should be humiliated, and who should be dehumanized. So we are denied rights by birth. I mean, both the caste people, Tamil and Palestinians, we are being denied rights by birth, and that is something structural. And it's part of a structural oppression by the power that is being subjugating us. Yeah, I'm talking about either the Indian government or the Sri Lankan government or the Israeli government as a settler colonial power. So what I wanted to say is that the World Without Walls campaign has been created for this purpose, for reinforcing joint struggle between people struggling against different forms of walls. The World Without Walls campaign was launched in 2017 by Stop the Wall and indigenous movements in Mexico. 2017, in response to Trump's construction of the Wall of Shame on indigenous land at the borders between Mexico and the United States. And nowadays, the World Without Walls campaigns is endorsed by over 400 movements and rights groups around the world. So, and like more people can join. And through that space created since 2017, we could successfully share and exchange stories of and experiences of resistance to walls, stories of suffering, but stories of hope too. And we also, the World Without Walls campaign is a space of resistance, everyday resistance for everyone who's suffering from walls to join. And we can, and through the World Without Walls, we can also think of practical ways to deal with these suppressive regimes that build walls, build and reinforce different types of walls through, for instance, let's say the Indian government, 50% of Indian import of weapons is from Israel, and they use their weapons to oppress those in India. as Bantu said, the freedom of expression is stifled. The castes are being oppressed more. More laws are being enforced, and these laws are being enforced, of course, by the use of power. So one way to these the Israel, when it exports its weapons to its field-tested weapons on Palestinians to India, to the Indian government, to oppress people either in India or to oppress the Kashmiri people, as India, the Indian government right now is taking up the Israeli model of settlement expansion in Kashmir and the oppression of the Kashmiri people, stifling their resistance to this settler colony, another form or another, let's say, model of settler colonialism. So we can join in struggle by trying to combat these systems that oppress both the Palestinians when Israel sells more weapons, and the Indian government when they use these Israeli weapons for its oppressive practices, by trying to pressure. I mean, the Indian people, the power of the people. I always have faith in the power of the people to put pressure on their government in order to stop buying Israeli weapons. And this is one way to impose a military embargo in Israel and divest from all the companies, the Israeli weapons companies that make more and more profits by marketing their weapons as being tested on the Palestinians, specifically on the people in Gaza, the children in Gaza. So that's one way, practical way, is to support the military embargo campaign against Israel, to support the BDS, like one of the victories, not just for Palestine, that victory that we've recently achieved in Stop the Wall and the World Without Walls, Europe branch, the victory that we've achieved when we could put pressure on a Portuguese company buying its killer drones and giving these killer drones to militarize the EU borders in order to kill migrants who seek refuge in Europe. So this company decided not to renew its contract with Elbit Systems, Israel's largest weapons company. That victory is not just for us in Palestine. It's also a victory for the migrants. Although the EU is still determined to militarize its borders against migrants, but through more pressure and through more collective actions, through more joint struggles, we can one day stop the EU and other repressive systems of any people talking about migrants or about Palestinians or other people. So that's the kind of resistance that I'm talking about. Another way to emphasize how joint and intersectional our struggle is to raise awareness. I mean, here in Palestine, to raise awareness of the suffering of the caste, the resistance of the caste. We really, and of course the Tamil, we really want to learn from experiences of resistance, experiences of surviving. And I think there is a lot to be learned in order to be able to survive and exist on our land in light of these expulsion and ethnic cleansing practices of Israeli apartheid. So awareness raising, exchange of knowledge and experiences is another way to emphasize solidarity and to reinforce our struggles against the systems that oppress us. Thank you.
Thank you, Manal, for sharing your concern right from the heart. You're living it out every day as to get the wall stopped and to have a world without walls. Friends, now I leave it open for maybe just 3 questions because we're running out of time. 3 short questions if somebody would like to ask any of our 3 speakers. I cannot see the screen fully, so I'll ask Ranjan to identify if there is somebody asking a question.
Yeah, please raise your hands if you wish to raise a question. John, did you want to ask? Yeah, John there.
No, this was a question I'd put in the chat box too, because the commonality in the 3 walls spoken of, and particularly flowing from there, the walls of the mind and the walls of the heart that are going to grow in the people of the coming generations. It's all happening within the gaze and the eyesight of the world. And the international impunity is something we have to address with ferocity, if I may say so, at par with the individual action in support of and by the people of individual countries, by the Palestinians, by the Tamils, by the way, who are not all Hindus. I know very many Tamils who are Protestants and Catholics and evangelicals and even independent Christians. So I think we need, and I think the only hope that I can see from the US change, because I believe governments act from the interests of their economies. But one hope is there, that maybe the continued degradation of the United Nations will stop to a small extent. And international agencies should then be able to speak to the International Council, all the other organizations. And I think advocacy must lie there also, and in each of our countries. And I wanted responses, if any, from the people.
I would like to talk from the Sri Lankan context. I don't know whether I can generalize my answer to the 3 contexts, but in Sri Lankan context, after the end of war, the Tamils in Sri Lanka, they wanted to internationalize and use the international justice for the solution of the problem, and also find justice for what happened in during the last war. But using the international justice is kind of a geopolitical work. It is not because of the justice, the understanding all the countries work together, and pumping a lot of money for advocacy work all over the world is a waste thing that we would say. I think especially the Tamil community should, the Tamil diaspora all over the world, rather wasting money so much on advocacy in international arena. They should work the money in a proper way to send that into this land and to rehabilitate the life of the people, those who have affected badly during the war, number 1. Number 2, international justice. What can that offer? After the Rwanda experience, it took 25 years to get the statement from the International Court. It said after 25 years, what happened in Rwanda is war crime, is genocide, that's all. What will happen to spend that amount of money and time and human resources just to get this statement alone? So I think we must look forward more a homegrown solution, I would say, and there are a lot of progressive in the other side too. We are not very clearly polarized. So I think whether we can intrude into the minds of the progressives and whatever we can do in a homegrown solution, that is my suggestion to my context as far as I experience this situation. Thank you.
If Roger, if I may just quickly make a comment. Yeah, the thing is that as people in struggle against walls, whether visible or invisible, I think our efforts need to be one that go beyond these boundaries. And, we need to network with one another. I'm not I mean, I agree with, I hear what Jody is saying about advocacy, his reservations, but the point I would like to emphasize is to sort of build and strengthen networks of solidarity in resistance. You know, that is what is important. You know, there are many of these, you know, just when, you know, the anti-racism struggles took place in the US, and there were lots of reverberations of that struggle in many parts of the world, in India too. And when recently, when the Dalit woman was raped in India, and there were demonstrations in the US and in Europe. So I think there is this spirit of resistance against oppression, against denial of human rights, against violation of human rights and human dignity. And I think this is where we need to sort of invest our energies. I do agree, you know, to a large extent, advocacy efforts tend to fail or, you know, tend to frustrate us because, you know, the governments, you know, with all their political and economic interests, you know, sort of don't really sort of make the way ahead, because that is exactly what we faced while internationalizing the Dalit issue at the UN, because many governments don't want to sort of ruffle or rub the Indian government on the wrong side because of business interests. But on the other hand, you know, bringing together the people in resistance, especially those, I think what is important is, you know, that we need to constantly problematize greed, arrogance, and, you know, abuse of power, rather than, you know, only sort of build on or talk about the sufferings that these cause to us. And I think we need to have a different kind of introduce and sustain a discourse that actually sort of indicts the greed, the arrogance, the selfishness of the powerful and the privileged. Thank you.
Thank you, Dinabandhu. A second question, okay, and brief. Anyone?
Roger?
Yeah.
Yeah, Roger,
Go ahead.
We are running out of time. It happens that the longer a webinar takes, more people leave. So before we lose too many people, it would be to listen to Lakshman Gunasekara, who I should very briefly at least introduce. Lakshman is an old-time SCM person, ecumenical person, and somebody from the media. He was former editor of the Sunday Observer, which of course, if you know Sri Lanka, you have to know the Sunday Observer and the daily newspapers of Sri Lanka. He's very involved with the Sri Lanka Committee Solidarity with Palestine, and is active on a multiple range of issues, gender, class, ethnic rights, and so forth. And he has taken on political roles when he was, because of his social activism, he became facilitator in negotiations between the Tamil secessionist movement and the Sri Lankan government and other parliamentary bodies during the Chandrika Kumaratanga regime. We requested him to kind of give us a roadmap based on what he hears. So I was glad to get in touch with him again after nearly 40 years, so old friends, and I hadn't seen him excepting once last year. So here he is. Can you take some time to give us this roadmap based on all the things that you've heard?
Thank you, Ranjan. I'm very grateful to be included in this discussion.
Can you be a little louder? Can you get closer to the mic? Yes.
Yeah. I'm very grateful to be included in this
Add
discussion.
one more thing, please.
Sorry. Can I be heard now?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm grateful to be included in this discussion. As someone who has tracked this the Palestine situation as a Sri Lankan activist over like 45 years now. I mean, I celebrated the defeat of US aggression in Vietnam. I celebrated the falling of the Marcos regime in the Philippines, the military dictatorship in South Korea. You know, we said as part of our international activism, these are all our concerns. And for me, Palestine is such a continuing agony for me. Manal, I mean, I've heard about what's going on in Palestine even before Manal was born, and I've never been there. But having been involved and experienced violence in my own country and solidarized with so many other countries, I have no doubt that I'm in agony to hear what he says. As someone who loves geography and history and archaeology, I have tracked the wall. I am intensely interested in the ideological dimension. As someone, I think Jude knows, someone who has been active in the ideological dimension in communication, in media, policy in Sri Lanka, against ethnic conflict, against supremacism. I can fully identify with the horror that's going on in Palestine and in Gaza. Is just unbelievable. So it's such a small place, right? So I think we cannot rest. We just cannot rest with Palestine, right? And it's getting worse and worse and worse, right? Uh, sure, Kashmir is getting worse. That is something we have to acknowledge. But it's not as gone as terrible in scale as it is in Palestine. It's an issue of comparative geography also. The scale per square foot impact in Kashmir is nowhere near the scale of per square foot or per square meter as it is in Palestine. Right? It is so small and so intense. So we are meeting now in this, what I find as a shared intimacy. We all get very close up to each other on Zoom, online, unlike being a faceless audience in a symposium. Online communications and online meetings and discussions and activism is something we're learning thanks to COVID, but it is something that is our strength today and has been even before COVID. And we should now, as a communication, I'm aware, we should now make this one of our major platforms, right? And that is a way of building bridges across the South Asian continent and between our continent, subcontinent and Palestine. That's part of the bridging that we can do. In terms of content ideas of future action, I mean, I see this as a diverse group of many activists in different networks of different degrees of intensity or focus on Palestine. But there are some content in terms of our parallel activisms, not necessarily complementing each other, and perhaps not necessarily all of us getting involved in a single organization as such. We need not do so, but we can complement each other and parallel each other, and perhaps in some ways network. And some of the areas are that we have in South Asia, social interest groups parallel to facing similar problems as in Palestine and in West Asia. And they may have that kind of interest in Palestine. I'll say how. We have interest groups who have been affected with territorial incursions, domination, exclusion in terms of economic and political and cultural discrimination and practices, state systems, inequality. Now here, there are parallel interests in terms of economic ties with the Zionist state, right? And economic ties can mean trade ties, markets, tourism. We can just go on, right? High-tech IT today is very much so. Israel is a strong country. Nuclear assistance for nuclear weaponry, all those things are there. Drones, the Sri Lankan armed forces benefited a lot from the drone technology of Israel. Then those groups that are similarly affected by ideological systems, right? In education content, historiography, I am very interested in the theological implications for theology in current Israeli secular archaeology, which has completely shattered much of the mythologies of Zionism and Christianity also. Then in education content, historiography, cultural identity exclusion, how state systems exclude cultural identity, and we see it happen physically in Palestine. I consider Palestine to be an active genocidal state. Sorry, Israel, Zionist Israel to be an active genocidal state, as was South Africa. Then we have special interest groups like people doing intellectual studies of analysts of ethnology, of supremacism in Sri Lanka, in Hindutva supremacism in India, in counter-insurgencies, in waywardness of different types of insurgencies. I don't use the word terrorism, right? The study and analyst groups, so much parallel to what goes on in and the evolution of such things in Palestine, in West Asia, the West Asian geopolitical complex and South Asia. Those are special interest groups, parallel. Then there are counter-ideological discourses. Combat communalism is a brilliant long-time example in Mumbai. But we have similar exercises in Sri Lanka and all over in the subcontinent. Countering ideological extremism and supremacism, mystification. There are the media discourses, media biases, the political economy or different types of media bias. That's something, again, my own interest. But there are a lot of that in subcontinent, right? So there is a possibility of collaboration online. Leave aside anything else, right? Leave aside the expenses for physical conferencing. Lot to share and do parallel activism, right? We can even go online in demonstrations, right? Real time in real life, right? Across the divide, the geographical divide. So now I know that, for example, fisher people in South India and fisher people in Sri Lanka, irrespective of their ethnicity, have special interests on fishing in the pork straits. We can use those as possible bridges, and we have tried about these things, even in business, right? Similarly, in tourism, now we're trying to do something. How can people going on Holy Land trips to Israel learn about how unholy that land is, right? What is the theology of the churches that send such groups on pilgrimage, right? What about the pastors who accompany such groups and come back? Is it possible we have to have prayerful reflection of what we see if we get to see them, right? We are aware of how tour groups are taken this way and that way to avoid the barbed wire and the walls. So these are some of the thematic areas, right, in which we can collaborate. Initially online, but online today is a method of actual organizing and activism. We know that, right? Facebook is one example only. Not that we need to get carried away with it. There are limits to it, but it is so. So what about the boycott of the Zionist products of the Zionist entity, right? India has a huge role to play there. India is a major market today for Israeli technology, agriculture, and IT, surveillance, right? We are also we are a small scale parallel to it. So we need to exchange information about what are these surveillance capacities. How much do we know? How do we inform the public about these things? So I'm just offering. I won't take. Then of course the other interests are constitutionalism. How do we evolve our own polities as much as we see the struggle and the agonizing in Palestine and that region, Israel occupied Palestine and the partly autonomous West Bank and Gaza. How do we evolve political associations there? And how do we evolve political associations in our own subcontinent? Our subcontinent is torn apart by colonial demarcations. We all know that, right? How do we evolve political associations, political community? How do we evolve our constitutions? That's something we can parallelize as much as, personally, I'm interested in how we evolve our historiography. I think I'll stop there and maybe we can hear some things. So I'm suggesting of starting with some of the different interest groups we have here represented. We can maybe develop some explorations of common programs, and then some of it can filter down to activism in our own areas. Maybe we can, some of us can get together as part of a intelligentsia communication network in South Asia. The different solidarity groups we have in our own country for Palestine can interlink. So that's another specific suggestion. Thank you. I hope I was clear. Was my speaking clear?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Ranjan, go ahead.
No, I think we've come to an end of a very meaningful encounter between three situations where we've talked about why we must collectively work together to dismantle barriers of separation. That is the theme that brought us together, dismantling barriers of separation. It, you know, I just, before I close, before I thank the speakers, I just want to read out something that John Dayal left, which I think is something that we need to talk about. That's a challenge, where he says the most disturbing aspect of the political, psychological, and physical walls is the impunity, the silence of the international community, and the complicity or tacit support of many governments, India among them, he said. But I think there was also this assertion that there is resistance, and we see it. We see the intersectionality of resistance across continents, people expressing solidarity one with another. So I think somewhere it is between this that we are challenged by Lakshman. Look at initial steps that we can take, even this being one form of media by which we can start expressing solidarity. When the rape happened in Hathras, we had quite a good attendance at a meeting where we protested this. So there are different ways in which we can begin to resist. For me, what I would think would be the global intifada, which we must collectively organize ourselves together to contest oppression, to contest divisions on the basis of unjust patterns of society. Thank you, Manal, for giving us your time. I wish we had plenty of time because we were not able to give you as much time as we would have liked to. This is the same thing goes with Bandhu, and the same thing for Jude and also Lakshman. We could have listened to all four of you for ages, but we have the limitations of time. Thank you for coming. And thank you everybody who came here and sat patiently and listened to us. Once more, thank you, Rifat, and thank you, Michelle, for being here. And thank you for friends from far away from Europe who've been here, people like Ella. I think Tyler is somewhere also in this group. So really appreciate this kind of solidarity coming from far away. This matters a lot. Nora, thank you for being here. This is one of our, you know, you call her, I won't call you a senior friend because I'm about your age group, but all the same people like you being here has made a difference. So thank you once again.
Thank you so much. It was great. It was great. And as you said, we needed more time because this is a topic in 3 countries from which we can learn so much. And as you know, I've been working for global justice all my life. So maybe we can find answers in at least how do we bring down all those walls of separation. And the invisible ones are more difficult than the visible ones. Thank you.
This is not one-off, and Rifat has been listening to us. So we'll come back to you, Rifat, with how this becomes a collective, becomes a wider collective. Yes, Lakshman.
No, Nida has asked a question as to what that group in Mumbai was. That's combat communalism. I have actually entered it into the chat. Combat communalism originally headed by Ms. Tista. I have met her once many years ago, but I've heard about her and I've watched her and the group. I think it's still functional. Combat communalism. It is known in India as one of the earliest such strong groups, such counter messaging groups.
Okay, thank you everybody. Good night, good afternoon, whatever that is. So, but I guess it's good night from good evening or good night. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Good night. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Bye.
Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you.